Hello Penguinauts, I'm the Beardy Penguin and welcome back to Kerbal Rising. First of all, apologies that this episode has taken so long to come out. I've been really busy with a lot of concerts, a musical and A-levels, and as such the normal upload schedule, I mean there already isn't really a schedule, but the normal sort of rate of uploads is going to decrease over the next 2 months. That's unavoidable, I am sorry about that, but most of you seem to be quite understanding. Anyway, on to today's affairs. So, last episode we conquered the moon of Olay, and now we've pushed the Gaians back all the way to the moon, now renamed to Gull. However, they've got quite a significant presence in the space around Gull, and as such we've actually waited 2 turns and formulated a new fleet known as the Crimson Fleet. It is now holding orbit over Gaia, now formed of 2 Mars-class frigates, a single Eros-class corvette, that's a new corvette, a Pluto-class corvette, and of course that Ceres-class skiff, which was the single survivor of the battle over Minmus. So now we're going to go towards the moon and we're going to destroy the last remnants of the Gaian fleet. In order to do this, we have positioned a new commander over the Crimson Fleet. His name is Preston Kerman. Those of you who can actually figure out who Preston Kerman's named after, well, the first person to put it in the comments, I'll pin the comment and then you can name the next ship. Because of course our new Mars-class frigate is actually called the ISS Conqueror. I've decided to actually name ships of sizes frigate and larger since they require quite a significant amount of resources, so I'm probably going to get relatively attached to them. As you can see, we've made a number of improvements to the Mars class since it had a little bit of testing in the last episode. Thank God we didn't actually have to fight any spacecraft last episode because yeah, we've upgraded the engine, so now it has a pair of thermal turbojets, so it has a lot more thrust at its disposal, though the engines are a lot less efficient. And also we fixed the fuel flow problem, so the fuel actually, you know, flows correctly into the engines. But here we are, arriving at Gull. As you've probably noticed, there is a massive impact crater where a huge asteroid screamed into the system, damaging the surface of Minmus, and then slammed into Gull, creating that huge impact crater, and a huge chunk of Gull's surface is actually still in orbit around it, forming an interesting looking moonlet. You can just see it in the background there on the left hand side. Because of the fearsome surface conditions, there isn't actually a base on the surface of Gull, but it has served as the headquarters of the Gaian fleet, and as such they've fallen back to here, and now they're making their final stand, hence why we decided to wait 2 turns so we could actually stockpile some ships. I know, Preston Kerman, they utterly ruined it, didn't they? This was all the product of the Great War. I couldn't have said it better myself. There are a lot of theories that the asteroid that screamed into the system was actually sent into it intentionally. Excellent, Preston Kerman. Couldn't have chosen a better person to lead the fleet. Preston Kerman was actually one of the most vocal advocates of expanding the Drados Imperium heading out into the system. It was his speech to the Emperor's Advisory Council. We shall bring order to this system, bring it to heel, or we will destroy it trying, that actually swayed the vote in favour of expanding and building the Spirit of Drados. Excellent. So, the enemy fleet actually consists of, well, quite a significant force. They've got a frigate with 2 55mm railguns and 2 escorting corvettes. And they're actually going to be quite a fearsome thing to face down. We're just adjusting our inclination with our RCS, and then we're heading in to intercept. Because they actually all have medium armor, so 300mm of titanium armor plating. And as such, as you can see, Preston Kerman has actually devised a plan to soften up the forces before we head in. This new Eros-class corvette only carries torpedoes. It's not going to participate in the main attack, but it is going to soften up the enemy forces beforehand. And since the last few episodes, we've actually got a new torpedo guidance system, which just gives us a few more significant figures to look at our target intercept distance, which means we can get that down to roughly 1 meter, allowing us to have a very accurate intercept with our new torpedoes. Now these are only 0.625 meter torpedoes. They don't pack a huge punch, so we have to get a direct hit on the enemy in order to actually inflict any damage, and even then they're only going to damage the system they hit. So against larger ships these would be pretty much useless, but against these relatively smaller ships and a pretty small if powerful frigate, they're going to do quite a bit of damage. We managed to get past the point defense grid, and sure enough, we rip the enemy frigate in half. Unfortunately, its weapons are still perfectly online. We just managed to rip off its engine block, so now the fleet is incapable of retreating. We have them trapped. So we actually have 3 more torpedoes where that came from, and another 2 on the Pluto class. So here we go, we can just keep launching these at the enemy because we're sitting just comfortably outside of their engagement range, since they don't have any super long range railguns like the 155mm or the 300mm mag cannon, because those are very, very expensive weapons that even we can't quite afford just yet. So here we go, launching a second salvo. The reason why this is actually so effective it's because we can cruise in at a relatively leisurely 250 meters per second, since the enemy ships don't have any point defense lasers. Yes, they have 20mm point defense cannons, but those just aren't accurate enough, and considering the spacing of the enemy fleet, they just aren't able to do enough damage to us and get enough fire accurately onto our torpedoes before we hit. A couple of point defense lasers in this fleet probably would have solved this problem, maybe just a single laser skiff, but the composition of the fleet isn't actually that good, and as such, we get another hit on the frigate. Unfortunately, they do actually manage to damage the torpedo just before it hits, and so it just skims off the surface, doing minimal damage. So, let's just launch another one. We're not going to risk entering engagement range while that frigate is still operational with its 2 railguns. Those railguns have the capability to rip our fleet to shreds the moment we close to 18 kilometers, and we're not going to risk that. So we're just going to fire all of our torpedo ordnance at that frigate until we have to close to engagement range. As you can see, now have RCS systems on our torpedoes as well, so we can make very, very fine adjustments, and we take a few hits on the way in, but thankfully we just about managed to get through the point defense grid one more time and hit the enemy frigate. We get a direct hit on the enemy bridge, and as such the frigate is completely obliterated, and now we can move in for the kill. So we're going to move into 18 kilometers and start opening up with our railguns. We're leaving the Aeros class behind. There's no point really bringing it with us. It can only fire torpedoes. And these ships are essentially point defense ships, and they're very small targets as well. So I doubt we'd be able to hit them with our torpedoes. So there's very little point wasting them. So now we're within 18 kilometers. We're going to start bombarding the enemy vessels. However, at this kind of range, the 55mm railguns, since they are the smallest and least powerful railguns, are pretty inaccurate, especially against small targets like these. Railguns are really designed for big ship-to-ship frigate versus frigate or larger vessel combat, and as such we aren't able to get much accurate fire on the enemy vessels, so we have to close to a slightly closer range. Thankfully though, the range on these enemy vessels is pretty poor, and as such they do make some evasive maneuvers, but they can't actually return fire until we close to about 2 kilometers, so we're just not going to close to that distance, simple as. We keep up this sort of barrage for a certain amount of time, but it's soon clear that we aren't going to be able to finish them with our railguns, so we close to point defense cannon range and start opening up with the 30mm cannons on our Pluto class corvette and the anti-ship laser on our Ceres class. I'm not gonna lie, these guys are putting up a pretty tough fight, all things considered, especially considering how incompetent the Veloxian Empire was back in the day. They were originally a tiny little nation around the time of the first major conflict on Kerbin between Kerbal and Cthenia, taking advantage of Kerbala's weakness after that war to invade, and then taking advantage of the Cthulian Civil War to take over most of the Cthulian Federation, before creating a peace treaty with Twitch-Jong-E. But as you can see, yeah, they're certainly not competent enough to avoid us obliterating them, and we take out the first enemy vessel, and now we just focus fire on the final one, and there's very little it can do to stop us. Look at that. Has there ever been a more beautiful sight? Yeah, the Bloxian Empire, they certainly had a bigger bark than their bite, so after they'd taken over quite a significant amount of the planet, their military was just drained. They didn't have enough manpower to actually hold on to their territory, and their military was sapped by guerrilla forces. And as such, they were incapable of defending themselves by the time Argonaut Industries set their sights on their territory, and they were ultimately conquered and left, essentially, enslaved. Until, of course, the whole planet got obliterated by the Argonaut Industries' nuclear arsenal when they decided to declare war on their previous ally, the Territorial Arctic Protection Entente. But there we go. We've obliterated the Gaian fleet, and we're not going to let any of those scum escape. We don't want them mixing up the gene pool in the future. They're mutated by the horrendous amount of radiation that is still left on Gaia, and of course, their whole race is incompetent, so I think we're just going to eradicate them from space. Preston Kerbin is notoriously ruthless in his tactics. And there we go, we have defeated the Gaian fleet around Gull, and in the next episode we will be invading the Gaian planet itself whilst sending an expeditionary force under Preston Kerbin to Scorch, which is a planet much closer in to Kerbal. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. I do realise this has been a much shorter episode, but next episode we're going to launch another carrier to supplement the Spirit of Drados, invade Gaia, and send a fleet to Scorch. So things are really starting to ramp up, and I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. Thank you for watching, everyone. I've been the Beardy Penguin, and I will see you all next time.